Hi, beautiful souls. It's Sadhana. I thought I'd share with you my candy box of little dewdrop inks. I actually like, just opening this box gives me so much joy. I love all this color. So today we're going to talk about edging decks and about some of the problems I've had with edging decks, as well as trimming and some of the recent decks I've trimmed up. So let's get started right away, and let's start with some of the more easier projects. This is the Land Sky Oracle by Theresa Hutch, and it just needed a little bit of pink on the edges. And in my experience, when a deck, when you haven't trimmed a deck, it's a lot easier because then you have not damaged the paper in any way, and so the ink doesn't tend to absorb into the cards as much. And so this was super easy. I edged this one in the Memento Angel Pink. So yeah, and this was a brand new ink pad, and it was sufficient to do these 40, I think it's 48 cards. And I believe just one coat with very, very minimal wiping. And I think that's kind of the secret. Like when you're starting out, if you just want to edge cards rather than trim and edge, it's a really good place to start. So this is the Flowers of the Night Oracle. This is Rock Pool. So the cardstock is a little bit like Schiffer cardstock, so very highly laminated. And I just edged these in black. I do need to touch up a few cards. I can see as I turn these around. And I did use the Memento ink as well, so the Tuxedo Black. And what I tend to do is use the bigger ink pad the first time I go around, and then I use this little one when I do the touch-ups, because this little one is really, it's kind of nice to use on the corners. This one is dried really nicely, and yeah, so no issues with that. And then the other deck I have here that I did not do any trimming is this one here, the Weaver's Oracle. So the Weavers, like I did my Osho Zen, multiple colors. So some of the ink pads that are hard, so that would have been probably the Potter's Clay. Sorry, I didn't write down what colors I used. So that's Potter's Clay. And I can tell that this one, so this is Cosmic Copper. And Cosmic Copper, so the ones that say Brilliance on them are softer ink pads. So when you press it in, so these ones do take a little bit more wiping, but they're really, really lovely as far as colors go. Yeah, and then I probably chose one of the greens, it looks like, and a beige color. And yeah, so that was very, very easy. Just divided the cards into an even number of piles, didn't worry about the suits or anything, and just did that, kind of matching the colors on the backs of the cards. So then the rest of the ones here involved cutting. This is the only indie deck that I've actually cut. And there is one that I am considering doing now, but I'll just show you this one. So this is the Luna's Soul. And I really didn't like those borders. It kind of reminded me of a Los Scarabeo deck, the way those borders were around the edge. And so I chopped those off. And then I edged the deck in the Brilliance Gold, which is, I believe, called Galaxy Gold. And it actually turned out really nice. It almost looks like a matte gold, matches perfectly on the back. And there was no issue. So this is obviously quite a nice cardstock because I don't feel any damage was done by the ink. They dried really, really well. And yeah, let's just check the shuffling. Right? Beautiful. Beautiful. So there's no issues with that, because often what happens is when you trim a deck, it never kind of riffle shuffles the same ever again. On my thumbnail, you see that, so let's get right to the Windex thing, because that might have sparked some of your interest. This deck here, which I have talked about a couple of times, so this is the Cirque, the Grand Cirque, and Sideshow Tarot. I kind of brought this out because I was kind of questioning why I had purchased it. And so I trimmed it and spent some time getting to know the cards. And then I was waiting for the ink to come in. And the ink I decided to use is this one. So this is called, the color is Love Letter. And this was one of the soft ink pads. And you can see how messy it is just by the ink around, splattered around the sides. So this ink requires a lot of wiping. And unfortunately, I decided to edge this deck at night. And I left it sitting on the table on the paper and did not wipe it down, came back in the morning. And so the cards that had the light color here or the light blue, the ink had all bled into the cards, and I was very sad. Because after you've trimmed a deck, right, and you spent the time edging it, you don't want it ruined by the colors bleeding onto the light colors. And so I wiped it with the paper towel like I always do. It didn't come off. I used a little bit of water, still didn't come off. And then I don't know what inspired me to go grab a bottle of Windex, but I sprayed the Windex onto a paper towel and I went through every single card and cleaned them up, and they cleaned up just beautifully. I was planning on throwing the deck out. It was so bad. But now I don't have to, because thanks to Windex, my cards look beautiful again. And there was a little subtle red border, I believe, on the inside border of these cards. So the red ink just made perfect sense. So I may, if I have the courage, the time, the patience, I may do it again just to get a little more saturation of the red color, but I might not, just because it was a lot of work to edge in red. I don't know if you've ever painted a room red or orange. It's like 3 times the work as it is as painting another color. And then while I was doing that, I went back to my Bonefire, which I had edged in red ages ago. So this one has been done twice. Once with the Ladybug color, and then again, I believe, with the Love Letter. And because this cardstock is a little different, it wiped off a lot easier. But after I had spent time cleaning up the Grand Circus deck, I went back and I noticed that I had missed some spots, or some of the spots hadn't come clean. And so I used the Windex after about like 4 weeks, and I was able to get all, like this card here was a mess. I was able to get all the little bits of bleed off every single card, and so it just looks really clean and beautiful. Yeah, so that's my Windex story. And now my battery's running out again. Okay, so next is Madame Endoras fortune cards. This one is a bit of a problem. There were two borders that I trimmed off, and it looks so much better now. I love it. I'm actually going to use these cards and bring them out for Samhain and with all of the Halloween readings and stuff. Looks beautiful, but because this paper is a little on the, I don't know, cheaper side, more on the cardboardy side, it has absorbed a lot of the ink, and it's still not dry after 4 or 5 days, and it's going to need to go into and be pressed by some heavy books. I mean, it is better than it was a couple days ago, but yeah, I find that the cheaper the paper, the more cardboardy the paper, the more the ink absorbs in and takes longer to dry. And then you get this funky puffiness around the edge. So what I usually do is just stack the cards under some heavy books to press them. But yeah, like I said, 4 or 5 days, this is still not dry. Yeah, but it turned out really well. It looks so much better. I'm very happy in that regard. And let's talk about this little deck. So also this one is still a little bit wet after several days. It's not quite ready to use yet. I was not an owner of Tarot of the Magical Forest until last week, and I decided finally to get the deck into my hands because so many people love this deck. And I really didn't understand what was so special about this deck. But now I do. Now I get it. Now I get it. I think that this deck is underutilized in a couple of regards, and one of them has to do with color. The use of color in this deck is brilliant. The way the artist has chosen to use reds or greens or yellows. So the yellows are not just representing the fire, the wand suit. It's used quite cleverly, and the use of greens and blues. And so I'm planning to do another video on this deck and really talk about the color. And yeah, so really, really happy. But right away I had to take off those low Scarabeo multi-language borders because they are just awful. And fortunately, there is a little tiny green border around the edge of these cards. So it makes perfect sense to edge them in green. And the color I used is called Cottage Ivy. I believe this is the same color that I used for the Druid Plant Oracle. And I might have used it for something else. So yeah, so I've used this ink pad a few times. This one also had a little bit of a bleed, and I didn't notice it until after they had pretty much dried. But again, that little Windex trick seems to have cleaned up all of the cards, and I really am happy with the way these turned out. So yeah, so those still need to dry for a little bit. It's amazing how long it takes some cards to dry. I have talked about Shadowscapes before, but in one of my recent Amazon shopping sprees, I purchased the Stephanie Pui-Mun Law art book. And so I decided I'm going to spend some more time with Shadowscapes. Sorry, I'm used to doing upside down, but now I realized I can just flip the video on when I'm editing. And so I trimmed off the 3 borders and then redid the corners. And I'm really, really glad that I did, because I don't know, it frees the artwork. And yes, of course, you know, this deck should be bigger, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has said that. But if you have sufficient lighting, if you have your glasses on, right, there's nothing wrong with the size of these cards. It really kind of makes you focus and takes you into the image. And by trimming this deck, yeah, those silver borders were just so unnecessary. Love this card. This is just such a gorgeous 9 of Pentacles. I would really love to have a poster of this, or an art print of this particular card. I find it so inspiring. And then of course I had to re-edge it in silver. So this is the second time I've edged this same deck in silver. And this Llewellyn cardstock doesn't seem to have that same kind of issue as the Lo Scarabeo or that monolith cardstock that I was talking about, where the ink gets absorbed in. And the Brilliance silver ink, and I should mention this in case you're shopping for ink. So the silver is not silver. This is platinum. This one's called Platinum Planet. And there's one that's actually called silver, but it's not silver, it's platinum. So let me pull that out for you, because I think this is really important, especially if you're going to order a large ink pad. So the one that's called Starlight Silver is much darker. It's more of a platinum color, at least to me. And the one that I used for this deck is called Platinum Planet, which is lighter, and it's a lot more silver. So yeah, so you might need that information if you're ordering the larger ink pads. And remember that the Brilliance ones are softer, like the ones that end in Lux, so you do need to make sure you wipe those right away, but they're certainly not as staining as the issues I had with the red and the green ink. So I think that's everything I have to show you here today. If you have any questions about trimming or edging cards, I'm by no means an expert, but happy to share with you my experiences and more details about the cards and the different products that I've used. Okay, so thanks for watching. Stay well. Namaste.